Picture this. A woman sits in a hospital waiting room, her hands clasped together, eyes closed, whispering silent prayers as her husband undergoes emergency surgery. Across the world, a man kneels on a prayer mat 5 times a day, finding structure and meaning in ancient rituals. In a quiet monastery, monks meditate for hours, their brainwaves showing patterns that neuroscientists are only beginning to understand. These aren't just spiritual moments, they're measurable biological events that are reshaping how we understand the human brain, body, and social fabric. Welcome to Logic over Spirit. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating intersections of human experience, where faith meets physiology, where belief becomes biology, where the intangible touches the measurable. For centuries, religion and science stood in separate corners, viewed as opposing forces. But modern research is revealing something remarkable. Belief in God and participation in religious practices aren't just abstract philosophical choices. They produce real, quantifiable effects on our physical health, mental well-being, and social connections. Now, let me be clear from the start. This isn't about proving or disproving the existence of God. This isn't about which religion is right or wrong. This is about understanding what happens in our bodies, our brains, and our communities when we believe. Whether you're devoutly religious, spiritually curious, or completely secular, the data we're about to explore affects all of us. We're going to examine this topic through 3 lenses: the hard science of neurobiology and health research, the philosophical frameworks that help us understand meaning and purpose, and the religious perspectives that have shaped billions of lives. So whether you're someone who prays daily or someone who hasn't set foot in a place of worship in years, stay with me, because what we're about to discover might just change how you think about the relationship between mind, body, and belief. Chapter 1: The Believing Brain. Let's start with something concrete. What actually happens in your brain when you pray, meditate, or contemplate the divine? Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg has spent decades using brain imaging technology to study religious experiences. His research reveals something extraordinary. When people engage in deep prayer or meditation, specific areas of the brain light up in consistent, measurable patterns. The prefrontal cortex, associated with focus and attention, shows increased activity. Meanwhile, the parietal lobe, which helps us distinguish between self and other, shows decreased activity. This creates what Newberg calls a sense of unity or transcendence, but it goes deeper than that. Religious belief appears to activate the brain's reward circuitry. When believers think about God or engage in worship, their brains release dopamine, the same neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, motivation, and bonding. It's the same chemical released when we fall in love, achieve a goal, or eat something delicious. Evolution has wired our brains to find meaning, pattern, and purpose. Religion taps directly into these ancient neural pathways. Here's where it gets really interesting. Studies using functional MRI scans show that when religious individuals are asked to pray for someone, the areas of the brain associated with empathy and theory of mind become highly active. The act of prayer literally exercises our capacity for compassion. As neuroscientist Richard Davidson observed, meditation and contemplative practices can actually change the structure of the brain over time, a phenomenon called neuroplasticity. William James, the father of American psychology, wrote in his seminal work, The Varieties of Religious Experience, that religion represents the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude, so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine. What James understood over a century ago, and what modern neuroscience confirms, is that these experiences aren't merely psychological, they're neurological events with real consequences. The philosopher and cognitive scientist Daniel Dennett, though himself an atheist, acknowledges that religious belief serves important cognitive functions. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines, constantly searching for meaning and causation in the world around us. Religion provides a comprehensive framework for understanding existence, which reduces cognitive load and anxiety. When we have answers to life's biggest questions, even if those answers are faith-based, our brains can operate more efficiently. Consider the placebo effect, one of the most powerful demonstrations of how belief affects biology. When patients believe they're receiving treatment, their bodies often respond as if they actually are, even when given sugar pills. Faith healing and prayer might operate through similar mechanisms. The belief itself triggers real biological responses: reduced stress hormones, enhanced immune function, and activation of the body's natural healing systems. But here's a critical nuance. The brain doesn't distinguish between belief in God and other forms of deeply held conviction. What matters neurologically is the intensity and consistency of belief, not necessarily its content. This raises profound philosophical questions. If the benefits come from the act of believing rather than the object of belief, What does that tell us about the nature of faith itself? Chapter 2, The Longevity Paradox. Now let's talk about something everyone cares about: living longer and healthier. Multiple large-scale studies have found a striking correlation between religious participation and longevity. A meta-analysis published in the journal JAMA Internal Medicine, reviewing data from over 1.5 million people, found that religious service attendance was associated with a 27% reduced risk of death over the study periods. 27%. That's comparable to the life-extending benefits of not smoking. The Seventh-day Adventist community in Loma Linda, California, is one of the world's blue zones, regions where people live significantly longer than average. Adventists, who follow biblical dietary laws and maintain strong community bonds, live an average of 10 years longer than other Americans. Their rates of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer are dramatically lower. While diet and lifestyle certainly play roles, researchers consistently point to the community's faith-based social cohesion as a major factor. Religious participation also correlates with lower rates of depression and anxiety. A study from Columbia University found that people who valued spirituality or religion were 75% less protected against major depression compared to those who didn't, even after accounting for social support and other variables. The protective effect remains significant. Why? Several mechanisms appear to be at work. First, religious communities provide robust social networks. Humans are social creatures, and isolation is literally deadly. Studies show that loneliness increases mortality risk as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Religious congregations create built-in communities where people regularly connect, support each other through crises, and maintain meaningful relationships. As the physician and researcher Harold Koenig puts it, religious involvement may be the most underappreciated health resource in medicine today. Second, most religions promote health behaviors. Many traditions discourage or prohibit smoking, excessive drinking, and drug use. They often encourage moderation, self-control, and care for the body as a temple or gift. These behavioral norms translate directly into better health outcomes. Third, religion provides what psychologists call a locus of control. When facing illness, loss, or uncertainty, believing that a higher power is involved can reduce feelings of helplessness and anxiety. This doesn't mean religious people deny reality or avoid medical treatment. Rather, they have an additional coping mechanism that helps them process suffering and maintain hope. The philosopher Kierkegaard wrote about the concept of faith as a leap beyond reason, but also as a source of profound existential security. In his view, faith addresses the anxiety inherent in human existence, what he called existential dread. Modern health research seems to validate this insight. People with strong religious faith report lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone that, when chronically elevated, damages nearly every system in the body. But we must be careful here. Correlation doesn't equal causation. Are religious people healthier because of their faith, or do healthier, more stable people tend to participate in religious communities? The research tries to control for these confounding variables, but perfect certainty remains elusive. What we can say is that even after adjusting for demographics, socioeconomic status, and pre-existing health conditions, the relationship between religiosity and health outcomes remains robust. There's also a darker side we shouldn't ignore. Religious guilt, shame, and fear can cause psychological harm. Toxic religious environments that promote judgment, exclusion, or denial of medical care can be actively harmful. The health benefits appear most pronounced in communities that emphasize love, acceptance, and mutual support rather than punishment and fear. Chapter 3, The Meaning Advantage. Let's shift now from the physical to the existential. What does belief in God do for our sense of purpose and meaning? Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote in his book Man's Search for Meaning that those who have a why to live can bear with almost anyhow. Frankl observed that prisoners who maintained religious faith or found meaning in their suffering were more likely to survive. His experience led him to develop logotherapy, a form of psychotherapy centered on the human need for meaning. Religion provides what social scientists call an ultimate concern, a framework of meaning that extends beyond individual life. When you believe your existence has cosmic significance, that you're part of a divine plan, or that your actions echo in eternity, it fundamentally changes how you experience everyday life. The mundane becomes sacred, suffering gains purpose. Death becomes transition rather than termination. Research in positive psychology supports this. Studies by Martin Seligman and others show that people who report a sense of meaning and purpose in life have better mental health, greater life satisfaction, and even improved physical health. Religion is one of the most powerful and accessible sources of this meaning, especially during times of crisis. Consider the psychological impact of believing in divine providence. When something terrible happens, a job loss, a diagnosis, a death, Religious believers can interpret it within a framework of ultimate meaning. It's not random, it's not meaningless. It's part of a larger plan, a test, a lesson, or even divine love expressed in ways we can't fully understand. As the Quran states, perhaps you hate a thing, and it is good for you, and perhaps you love a thing, and it is bad for you, and Allah knows, while you know not. The philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, himself a fierce critic of Christianity, recognized the power of religious meaning-making. He worried that the death of God in Western culture would lead to nihilism, a sense that life has no inherent meaning. His prediction seems prescient. Modern secularization correlates with rising rates of depression, anxiety, and what's been called deaths of despair, suicides and overdoses driven by meaninglessness. But here's where philosophy complicates the picture. Existentialist thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that authentic meaning must be self-created, not handed down by tradition or authority. From this perspective, religious meaning might be comforting, but it's not genuine. It's what Sartre called bad faith, living according to external definitions, rather than authentic self-determination. This philosophical tension is real, but the health data doesn't care about philosophical purity. What matters for well-being isn't whether meaning is self-created or divinely ordained. What matters is that people have it. A sense of purpose, wherever it comes from, protects against despair. Religion also provides what anthropologists call rites of passage, structured ways of marking life's transitions, birth, coming of age, marriage, death. These rituals help us process change and maintain continuity with the past. Secular societies often struggle to replace these functions. We graduate, we get divorced, people die, but we lack the communal frameworks for processing these experiences together. The Catholic theologian Thomas Merton wrote, "True happiness is found in unselfish love, a love which increases in proportion as it is shared." Religious communities, at their best, create environments where this kind of love can flourish. When your purpose is connected to something larger than yourself, when you see your neighbor as created in God's image, or as a fellow soul on a spiritual journey, it changes how you treat them. Chapter 4: The Social Fabric. Humans evolved in small, tight-knit groups. For most of our species' history, belonging to a community wasn't optional. It was survival. Religion, many anthropologists argue, evolved as a mechanism for creating and maintaining these essential social bonds. Emile Durkheim, one of the founders of sociology, studied religion not as a system of beliefs about God, but as a social institution. In his view, religion's primary function is to create collective consciousness, shared values and identity that bind individuals into cohesive communities. When we worship together, follow the same moral codes, and participate in the same rituals, we're reinforcing social solidarity. The data supports this view powerfully. Religious communities are among the most effective social support networks ever created. They mobilize during crises, care for the sick and elderly, support struggling families, and provide social connection across generations. A study published in the American Sociological Review found that religious people have more close friendships, receive more social support, and volunteer more than non-religious people, even after controlling for other factors. This matters profoundly for health. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, one of the longest-running studies of human life ever conducted, followed individuals for over 80 years. The clearest finding: close relationships, more than money, fame, or career success, are what keep people happy and healthy throughout their lives. Religious communities facilitate exactly these kinds of relationships. But there's more. Religion often creates what sociologists call bridging social capital, connections across different demographic groups. In religious congregations, people who might never otherwise interact, different ages, classes, professions, form meaningful relationships. This cross-pollination of social networks has unique benefits. Religious communities also tend to enforce pro-social norms. The anthropologist Ara Norenzayan argues that belief in moralizing gods, deities who care about ethical behavior and punish wrongdoing, helped large-scale human cooperation evolve. When you believe God is watching, you're more likely to act ethically, even when no human is watching. Studies show that even subtle religious primes, displaying a picture with the word God, or having people swear on a Bible, increase honest and cooperative behavior. The philosopher, Alasdair MacIntyre, argues that modern society suffers from moral fragmentation, a loss of shared ethical frameworks. Religion, in his view, provides comprehensive moral traditions that tell us not just what to do, but who to be. These traditions create communities of character formation, places where virtues are taught and practiced collectively. Of course, religion's social dimension has a shadow side. In groups create outgroups. Religious communities can be exclusionary, judgmental, and even hostile to outsiders. Religious identity has motivated countless conflicts, from medieval crusades to modern terrorism. The same mechanisms that create group cooperation can fuel out-group hostility. But here's a critical distinction. The health benefits of religiosity appear strongest in communities that emphasize inclusion, service, and universal love rather than exclusion and fear. Research shows that people who attend services regularly but hold rigid judgmental attitudes don't show the same health benefits as those who combine religious practice with compassion and openness. The civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. embodied this inclusive vision of religious community. He said, "I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together." King's faith motivated, not tribal exclusion, but universal human dignity. Chapter 5, The Faith Prescription. So where does all this leave us? Can we prescribe beliefs like medicine? This question reveals the complexity at the heart of our topic. You can't fake genuine belief. You can't decide to believe in God the way you decide to take a vitamin. Belief is either authentic or it isn't. This is what Kierkegaard meant by the leap of faith. It can't be calculated or engineered. It's a fundamental orientation toward reality. Yet many of religion's health benefits don't require theological belief. Meditation, community participation, ritual practice, and contemplation of meaning can all be pursued in secular contexts. The challenge is that stripped of their religious frameworks, these practices often lose their power and consistency. How many people start meditation practices only to abandon them within weeks? Religious traditions provide structure, community accountability, and integration with a larger meaning system that helps practices stick. The psychiatrist Carl Jung wrote, "Among all my patients in the second half of life, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life." Jung wasn't necessarily advocating for traditional religion, but he recognized that the questions religion addresses, meaning, purpose, mortality, transcendence, are fundamental to human psychological health. Some researchers and practitioners are trying to bottle the benefits of religious practice in secular forms. Mindfulness meditation, derived from Buddhism but stripped of its religious context, has become mainstream in psychology and medicine. Studies show it reduces stress, improves focus, and alleviates depression. Similarly, Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs incorporate spiritual principles, including belief in a higher power, as central to recovery. But critics argue that these secularized versions lose something essential. The philosopher Charles Taylor warns against what he calls the flattening of modern life, the loss of transcendent dimension. When we reduce prayer to stress management or community to social capital, we may capture some benefits while missing the deeper transformation that religious traditions offer. There's also the question of honesty. If you don't believe in God, should you pretend to for health benefits? Most ethical frameworks would say no. Authenticity matters. Living a lie, even a beneficial one, corrodes integrity and ironically, might undermine the very benefits you're seeking. Perhaps the answer isn't choosing between religious faith and secular skepticism, but recognizing that different people need different paths to well-being. For some, traditional religious faith provides everything discussed in this video: neurological satisfaction, health benefits, existential meaning, and social belonging. For others, secular alternatives like philosophy, nature connection, artistic expression, or humanistic community serve similar functions. What matters is that we recognize the human needs these systems address. We need meaning, we need community, we need practices that connect us to something larger than our individual egos. We need ways to process suffering and face mortality. We need moral frameworks and communities of virtue. These aren't optional luxuries, they're fundamental to human flourishing. The medical researcher Harold Koenig suggests that physicians should ask about patients' spiritual lives. Not to proselytize, but because spirituality is a significant factor in health outcomes. Some hospitals now employ chaplains alongside doctors, recognizing that healing involves more than just treating the body. The question isn't whether belief in God and religious practice affect health. The evidence is clear that they do, significantly and in multiple ways. The deeper questions are philosophical and personal. What does it mean to believe? Can meaning be created or must it be discovered? How do we build communities that provide support without demanding conformity? How do we face existential questions with both honesty and hope? Conclusion. We've journeyed through neuroscience labs and ancient temples, through sociological data and philosophical arguments. We've seen how belief in God and participation in religious practice correlate with longer lives, better mental health, reduced stress, stronger social bonds, and greater sense of meaning and purpose. We've explored the mechanisms, from dopamine release to social support networks, that might explain these benefits. But we've also seen the complexity. Religion can heal or harm. Belief can provide comfort or cause anguish. Communities can include or exclude. The relationship between faith and flourishing isn't simple, and it isn't the same for everyone. What's clear is that the questions religion addresses, why are we here? How should we live? What happens when we die? What gives life meaning? Aren't going away. These are human questions, as relevant now as they were thousands of years ago. Whether we answer them through traditional faith, personal spirituality, philosophical inquiry, or some combination, we must answer them somehow. Because the alternative, meaninglessness, isolation, existential anxiety, comes with its own health costs. Maybe the deepest insight is this: we are not just physical beings, we're meaning-making creatures who need purpose, connection, and transcendence to truly thrive. Whether you find these through belief in God or elsewhere, the need itself is real and universal. So I'll leave you with this. Whatever your beliefs, ask yourself, do I have a sense of meaning and purpose in my life? Do I have a community that supports me? Do I have practices that connect me to something larger than myself? Do I have ways of processing suffering and facing mortality? These questions matter, not just for your spiritual life, but for your physical and mental health. If you found this exploration valuable, please like this video and subscribe to Logic Over Spirit. Leave a comment sharing your perspective. Whether you're a person of faith, a questioning skeptic, or somewhere in between, your voice adds to this important conversation. And if you know someone struggling with questions of meaning and purpose, share this video with them. Sometimes understanding the science behind these ancient practices can open new doors. Remember, the goal isn't to win an argument about God's existence. It's to understand ourselves better, to live more fully, and to flourish as the complex, meaning-seeking creatures we are. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep growing. Thank you for watching.